All right, guys, we're live now in the season one Talking Loud podcast, episode 3 with my guy Natty's Naughty Nursery. He's got over 10,000 followers on Instagram. He's growing some of that fire and also doing a little bit of pollen stuff as well. So we're going to pick his brain today and find out what he's got going on over there. So, Natty, tell me a little bit about yourself and how'd you get into growing?
Cool. Well, thanks. First off, thank you for having me here. It's pretty cool to be on the other side. So getting asked the questions instead of asking them.
Yeah, because you have that cooked and caffeinated podcast as well. Shout out to that. That's pretty dope. You guys should definitely check that out. I'll put a link to that down below.
I appreciate it. It's a bit of fun for sure. So what got me into growing? I actually only started 2 years ago.
Okay.
I actually had a really bad horseback riding accident. I used to work with horses and work on farms, and there's this one day, it's 2 a.m. We're out on horse. The horse gets scared, he starts running. He is going home, whether he has me on board or not. He is out of here. And long story short, I didn't go home with the horse. I ended up on the ground. I broke 2 vertebrae in my back.
Wow.
I herniated 3 discs. I've done a pile of damage to my spine. It was a significant accident for sure.
Yeah, that sounds like a tough one, bro.
Yeah, and with most people in Canada, we if you have the option for long-term pain management, you can turn to cannabis. Right? We can go get our medical license, and we can either have it supplied to us or we can go ahead and grow.
Okay. So actually that kind of leads, I guess, to something I meant to ask you. So does that come into the ACMPR compliance stuff? Because I saw that in your bio.
Yes. So in most provinces right now where it's legal, you can grow 4 plants recreationally, just anybody without a license. But I myself, I mean, if you want some sort of pain relief, or if you want strong medicine, it usually has to be concentrated down into butters and topicals or extracts or something like that. So you need more product to be able to make that a viable option.
Absolutely.
So I went with the base license, which is 25 plants and up to, I want to say, up to 5 grams a day or something. That's how they look at it. If I was using 10 grams a day to medicate myself, then they give me a 10 gram a day license, which is 30 or 40 plants. And so right now I'm actually on a 98 plant license.
Dope.
But what that allows me is because everything counts as a plant. So your seedlings count as a plant.
Okay.
Your clones count as a plant. Your mothers, your ones that are in flower, everything counts as a plant. So it all counts towards that 98 plant count. So it gives you a little more room for that perpetual grow. And for being able to what I'm doing right now with a bit of breeding and stuff as well, is I'll be able to still keep myself in flower, but also still kind of work on some projects. And I have a little bit of room in that license to or to do, kind of move around.
Yeah. No worries. I'll deal with that afterward.
I'll try. Well, I'm from Newfoundland. That's we are a very curse heavy. I'm trying to keep that to a bare minimum for you, my man.
No worries, bro. I got you. It's hard for me as well. So you're allowed up to 98 plants, because I seen that you have a few tents on rotation, and I assume that you have a perpetual grow. I mean, I myself had one, but as we were talking a bit before off air, cut everything down recently. All my tents are down right now. I have nothing because I'm in the middle of a move, so things are sort of in limbo for me. But I see you've got a few tents on rotation. I see you've got clones set up in a few of them, seedlings in a few of them, and then you've got some monsters with some really nice branch structures and some other ones. So tell me a little bit about those tents.
Man. Okay, so right now we're sitting at 8 tents.
I thought it was 3 or 4. Damn, bro.
So I don't show everything on Instagram because it'd be a little inundating. There's 7 days out of the week. I have 8 tents. If I was to try to keep it all on a schedule, I'd be posting 2 to 3 times a day to try to keep everybody up to date on everything that's happening. So sometimes some of these tents go a little bit of the wayside. But we're sitting at 8 tents currently. It's so weird to say that. So I have 4 upstairs in one room, and that's like my perpetual grow and my like breeding projects and stuff. Kind of can happen up there because there's, you know, I've got it vented to the outside, so the last tent has a lot of negative pressure. If I'm to find males, that's where they stay. People ask me all the time, like they see that male in there and like, dude, like how have you not pollinated the ladies that are in flower 1 tent across? They're like 2 feet away and there's no seeds in there. And that's negative pressure.
Negative air pressure.
And good SOPs. So good standard operating protocols. So like I know not to have this tent open when this one is open. I'm not going to go shake that male and then like just brush myself off in front of the females, right? Like there's a lot of work.
That negative air pressure is really, really helpful in those situations too.
Oh, it's key. It's key. So I'm fortunate enough that we own the house here, right? So for me to go into that room and drill out through the side of the house and put in like a proper 4-inch dryer vent. So it just looks like I have a dryer in that room on the inside. But that allows me to pull fresh air in and push all the hot, humid, dank air out. So we've got that good negative pressure, and I've got a good circulation of fresh air happening all the time, right? That's key. Keeping in that fresh air, keeping that CO2 levels where they should be. Excellent. So that's upstairs. There's I have a 3x3 where I've been keeping some mother plants that I've been like kind of holding on for a while. There's the 5x5. That's the one with the big gnarly re-veg, the one with the crazy branches everywhere.
Those branches, I love that one, bro.
So I didn't train her like that, hey?
Was that Hazy Lady?
No, Hazy Lady is the red one.
Okay.
The big monster plant, the big re-veg. That's actually Blue's Glues. That's my strain.
Oh yeah, I remember Blue's Glues.
So that's her. She's actually heavily pollinated right now with the Limetta marmalade male. So which is or Limetta Afghani, sorry. So that's kind of happening up there. I've got the 2x4. That's full of, as of last night, that's actually full of skunks and Emerald Frost, which is another one of my strains. And then the 2x2 is probably going to get the chop today, and that's the one with the Hazy Lady, the grape cake, and the peanut break, the really colorful tiny tent.
Now, for everyone that's watching, if you guys don't know, Natty has got some crazy twisted branch structures going on some of his plants. So you guys need to check him out on IG, if not, because they are lit. I mean, I took some inspiration and I did a little can of bonsai a while back, but it's nowhere near the level that you're on. So mad respect to that, bro.
I appreciate that. That was like, I just started doing that because I had that one Hazy Lady. She's the one that's all twisted. And I decided, I was like, man, like I'd like more in this little tent because we had some projects that were coming, but like to get all the equipment and stuff here, it was going to take a while. So I wasn't going to be able to have my big grows on the go. So I was like, well, let's see if we can like really fill up this 2x2. So the Hazy Lady she was a clone that I've had for a while. I put her in, but she was tall and lanky, and I wanted to pop some femmes and get those to hopefully catch up. So I bent her down and twisted her around and twisted her branches and did whatever he could to kind of slow her down and even out her canopy while the other two caught up, and it worked out. Now we've got them tied together, eh? The two ends have met back up together and they're twisted and tied, and it's
into like one. That's pretty cool. So I guess you were trying to like maximize the space that you had, right? Because it's just getting so tall. So,
yeah. And that's a short tent, right? It's a 2x2, but it's only just 5 feet, I think. Yeah. It's just 5 or just like 5'2" or something like that. So the height of that canopy can only get so high because the light can only go up so high as well, right? But yeah, it worked out. It's good and controlled, and should probably get the chop today or tomorrow. Smells incredible. Trichomes are ready to go. That natural fade has come in, and they're starting to like chew up that last bit of chlorophyll.
The beautiful part.
And I haven't done anything. People keep asking me like how I'm pulling fades like this.
Yeah.
Organics.
Organic. Well, organic is something I want to get into in a bit. But since we were on tents, like your tents, they just always seem so full. Like I don't even know how many plants you've got in there. Like you just, one of your pictures, you literally pulled over a pound, I think, from one of your tents. I'll throw that up on screen so that everyone can see it. But it's really dope. So I assume that you have a really serious training schedule. Like how do you get those sorts of yields? Is it training, feeding, both?
Yeah, it's a lot of TLC for sure, but it's mostly the training. Like the ones that you've seen, those were all like I did a big scrog
Yeah,
net for all of those. I build a
makes
big
sense.
frame, I put a scrog net on it, and I actually attached the frame to little ratchet straps, so I could like bring the whole scrog net up or down, whatever I need
Yeah,
to. So I'll put that in
yeah,
place, bring it down, and I just start like bouqueting open the plants. I just try to open them up and just kind of like
spread
weave
them
some
out.
branches in, get a good start, because when you flip the flower, they're going to stretch another 8, 10, 12 inches depending on the plant.
Yeah,
So I get them like set up, I flip it, and just let them do their last little bit of stretch and fill, and then just let them all come up. And other than that, I'll top dress once every 2 to 3 weeks, and I'll feed a tea either every feeding or every second feeding. I'll do like a aerated compost tea, and by the time I'm into, let's say, like, week 7, week 8 of flower, I'll get away from the top dresses. I'll just have teas. Then I'll just have a bit of molasses water, and then I'll just have water as we get towards the end. And I'll just kind of
sweet.
just slowly kind of kick back on like that microbial life, just kind of like let things die down a little bit and let the plants
Yeah.
just do their thing. And they usually pull a really nice fade, but they're super happy. I just kind of let them do their own damn thing, and then
Sometimes less is more, right?
that's right. Don't fret so much over it. Like I try to tell people that all the time. Like if you just took some seeds and threw them outside, they would grow without you. You wouldn't have to
100%.
do anything. They would just grow without you. That's what they've been doing for millennia. So you don't have to force it so much. So a lot of it is just now I do usually mix like a super soil, like a much richer batch of living soil. So the plants have a lot to feed off, right? I don't have to keep pounding nutrients to them. They have everything they need when they need it. And we're not trying to like force salts or anything to them. And they seem to enjoy it. They always give you a good show because they give that natural fade and that natural anthocyanin response with the LEDs and with that good living soil fade, right? So I've been getting great yields, strong terpenes, and just, beautiful, beautiful canopies.
No, that's actually something I was going to go on to next. So I see you're like a big advocate for like let the soil do the work and living soil. Like a lot of new growers, typically they may be afraid to like get into organics or living soil. It just sounds a bit more scary or complicated, and mixing bottle nutrients just seems the easy way to do things, right? So what would you say to a beginner grower who's looking to get into organics and living soil?
Well, for me, it's God, there's so many levels to this one. It's a good question.
Yeah,
That's a good question. So with the salts, I'll break it down to like, fairly easily for the newbies. Like with salts, we're pretty well feeding the plant when we want to feed the plant, right? We kind of like shove some nutrients at them. It's here's your food, eat it. With the natural, I keep saying natural, with the living soil, we're trying to like culture as much fungal life and everything that we can, microbial life in there, so that all those nutrients are available when the plant wants them. So when the plant says, I'm ready to push a little bit further and I need to thicken up my stalks, it just communicates with the soil. The roots, the fungals, all the mycorrhizae attached onto the roots, they all communicate with each other. And it says like, hey, I need more magnesium, a little more calcium. Is it down there? Can I have it? And they'll exchange a bit of carbon, a bit of hydrogen, and they send it on up. That's kind of the idea behind it, is that communication with the soil food web. So one thing that this comes up every time that somebody's like, I can't believe you do organics, man. What about bugs? What about pests? Right? That's always like a really big sticking point for people is you're going to get bugs, you're going to get pests.
Yeah.
You can get bugs and pests in cocoa and salt. You can get it everywhere.
Yeah.
The key to that is having your standard operating protocol. So be ready. Don't wait until there's pests. Be proactive. Like I've had pests before, but that's only when I slack on things. When I'm not cleaning the grow room enough, when I'm not making sure that the soil's like you're not just sitting wet and damp.
Be proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. So if you have it set up, you can dial in any grow. You could do salts, you could do cocoa, you could do your dry amendments, you could do living soil, you can do everything as long as you're prepared for it, right? When you hear those horror stories, that's just somebody who was not prepared. They didn't have everything lined up. So you get your tent, you get your light, you get your soil, you get your ventilation, you get your pH, whatever you're going to get, but make sure you have some sort of IPM, your integrated pest management. So you have your spray, or in my case with soil, a lot of it is like beneficial mites and stuff like that. You have your springtails, you have your nematodes, which you can get into the soil before you ever plant anything, right? Like you can have them in there and they will predate on, they'll eat all the larvae of like thrips and fungus gnats and things like that. So it's kind of just like understanding your enemy, right? The fungus gnats like really like soil that's been sitting and it's dank and it doesn't have a lot of good airflow and it's got good decomposing material and fungus is starting to grow on the top. They like to be there. But if you keep good airflow and you're good about your waterings, you won't get fungus gnats, right? There's a lot of like standard operating protocols. If you're outside in your garden and you're playing around with the garden, you're doing stuff, have a change of clothes or maybe even a shower before you go into your grow room, right? Don't just walk in from there to there because thrips are going to probably jump off your clothes. They can fly a little bit, so that's their thing. They'll fly off your like tomato plant, land on you. And when you go in to check on your girl, they fly off that little bit that they need. And then you get
it's crazy that you say that because like that actually happens. Like I go outside in my porch because it's pretty warm and I medicate out there. And sometimes because they're like little bugs in the garden, I literally see them jump on my shirt and I walk back inside and I'm like, you little critter, you're trying to get into the grow room, ain't you? You're going to start a family. You need to get those out of there.
They're trying to set up shop. Exactly.
Absolutely. So you need to like get those stuff out.
Yeah. And then like another thing when it comes to the living soil is like prices, right? Like especially if you do it like how I did it, and I mixed like you can mix a much richer batch than what you could buy off the market, let's say. So I'll get my peat and I'll get my living soil and I'll get all my things and then I'll get amendments and I mix this super batch. That could be a little expensive at the start, but that soil is going to last you a long time, especially like grow after grow after grow. And it gets better with every grow. I'm not re-upping on bottles of nutrients every grow or every few grows. I'm not, which to me is a big deal because like at the end of a grow, I don't want to look at plastic bottles.
Yeah.
I don't want to look at a big pile of plastic bottles and be like, man, okay, cool. I grow this plant, but I also like the carbon footprint of getting that bottle first filled and sent to the distributor is huge. Then from the distributor to me so that I could grow this plant in my house, like logistically, it just seems crazy. But like organics and stuff, we can get away from the bottles. We can pretty well, like when you do a super soil mix, you can feed them water. That's why it's called living soil. You don't have to do anything else. You can feed it water, let the fungal life, let the microbial life establish in that pot. That pot will just always be rich and bioavailable. And you can top dress and you can give it little amendments and stuff, but it's not every 2 weeks, it's not every 3 weeks. You're just kind of let the soil just kind of do its thing. And the plants and all the other life that could be in there, depending on if it's cover crop or companion planting, they don't need a lot. They just need a bit of water, keep it moist, and let them just communicate with the soil. And by the time you've got that dialed in, you're laughing because you're just feeding water, but you're getting these huge colas, you're getting this beautiful return. The terpenes have been much stronger, much nicer. The effects I find is last a lot longer. It's a lot nicer. To me, it's a more whole and complete process and end game. Like you just get so much more out of it in the long run, right? Instead of like I say, more bottles, re-up.
And when you think of it like that, I guess it's like you may pay a bigger upfront cost, getting all the ingredients for your living soil, the cocoa, the Gaia green or whatever you're going to put in there, the bone meal, all that stuff. Yeah. But the bottle nutrients is a recurring cost. So you'll find yourself having to buy that every few months or so. And it's a recurring cost. And it's crazy because the footprint really is huge. The logistics it takes for it to reach here, to get to the shipper, to come to you, for it to then get decomposed. Bottles don't decompose. So that's a great point.
Yeah. And that was something that when I started, I was doing cocoa and dry amendments, which is something I still dabble with a little bit. but I found it very kind of wasteful. Because like I
Yeah.
found at the end of it, I was like, all right, cool. Now I got to re-up on the worm casting. I got to re-up on my 444, my 284, or my this and my that. I had to like keep. I was like, oh my god, like we're 3 girls in. I got to re-up again. And it was like, man, like this just feels so crazy wasteful.
Yeah.
So when you start getting into recycled soil and living soil and all these different like types of soil, like when I'm done with these 7 gallons, I'll tear them apart. Jump that down into a big Rubbermaid container. I'll lightly amend it because it doesn't really need a lot. It just needs a little like love to the microbial life, and you can reuse that soil again in the large pots. Because I have 4 45-gallon living soil no-till pots downstairs. Those pots will just sit there. Right, I'm not gonna tear them up. They're just gonna sit there and get better and better as time goes by. And that's
100%.
the no-till side of things, then, right?
Yeah.
Which is where we're really trying to culture that fungal life and that microbial life.
I was actually just gonna ask you that. So when you finish and you cut down your plants and you dump the soil into the big Rubbermaid, I guess that's a bit different from the no-till method. So you just quickly break down like why no-till is a bit different from that? Like how is there a difference?
So I love this actually. This is a great question. So like in recycled soil, when I'm done with the pot, now usually you won't go too big on a recycled soil pot. You know what I mean? It's kind of, you're not going to get up in your 10s and 15s and 20s and 30s. You're probably going to max it at like 7 to 10, maybe somewhere around
Most
there.
times.
Like the ones in the 2x2, they're 7s. When I'm done with those, like the root ball is going to be packed in there for one thing. So I'm probably not going to be able to just plant something back in it. But when I'm done, I'll harvest that plant. I'll put all the dirt back down into like a container, which can be re-amended, and it can just sit there then if you want. When you need soil, you have soil. You can use it. The no-till option, and this is why I went to the no-till, because this is what made the most sense to me. The no-till, think of it like this. Like we go out to the forest and you look at like a square foot of the forest floor and it's packed full of life. Every inch is maximized and it's thriving. There might be a bush or a tree and some moss and some fungus and some mushrooms, and there's a little bit of everything all in there. But no one's out there to feed it, right? No one's giving it nutrients. No one's out there to like doing anything. It's all the deadfall. All the leaves come down, the branches fall down, a dead animal, a dead bush, everything that falls down, hits the ground, needs to be broken down, or we'd be buried in leaf litter and trees and all kinds of stuff. What breaks that down is the fungal life and the microbial life, right? So the mushrooms come up, they break down all those leaves, they feed off of it, and that returns all those nutrients back down into the soil, which is feeding like bacteria, different pathogens, and protozoa, and there's small little bugs, and everything is kind of feeding off all that stuff that's fallen down on that forest floor. And trees are able to thrive, right? Like massive trees. There's tons of nutrients there. So when we go in, if I was to tear up that square foot, I'm now breaking up all that mycelium, all that fungal life that's in there. I'm now tearing up all this established colony that's been breaking down all this stuff. So I've kind of severed that connection, right? Now you need to rebuild all that fungal life into that area, or nothing's going to be able to be broken down. There's not going to be able to be anything that can thrive. So in the no-till pots, that's what we're going for. Is we don't till them, because we allow all that life that's underneath the surface to break down the cover crop that I'll chop and drop, the leaves that I'll defoliate and throw back down, all the things that are going to be growing, the root balls that get left in the pot, because I'm not going to pull the cannabis plant out. I'm going to get down best I can underneath the root ball and take that out, and you're going to leave the roots in, which are full of nutrients and phytohormones and all kinds of amazing stuff that, once again, gets broken down. So we're trying to just culture as much life and maximize every square inch that we can in these pots. And we're just allowing it to just become its own little contained ecosystem, right? So at the end of the day, you're feeding it a bit of water, and it's just this rich, bioavailable sea of nutrients. And then anything you plant in there is, oh, so happy.
Dude, that's a fantastic example. I'm glad I asked this guy this. Like, you were the perfect person to ask that question to, because that's a fantastic example that you can get like a picture in your brain of what happens. The different layers in the soil, in
Yeah.
the rainforest, is all natural. And then when you actually break it down and mix it up, is what happens is that you break down that life and you sort of destroy the natural habitat that was formed in the soil.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there are pros and cons, right?
Yeah, and that's like a very normal. It's a very like societally, like that's a very normal thing for us. Is like, all right, it's the beginning of the year. I'm gonna get my tiller out and then I till my garden. I'm gonna put some stuff in it, and then like I've actually got a few people now who are like, oh, I till my garden every year, but like this year sucked. I don't know why I couldn't grow anything. I was like, it's because you just keep severing that connection.
Yeah.
All right, and that's something I don't think people understand too. Is like when you see a mushroom out in the forest, that's actually the fruiting body of this vast network of like fungal life and all these little hairs that you can't see because it's under the surface. Only when you see that mushroom, that's the fruit. That's like the bud coming off of your flower, right? Like that's underneath is this vast web of mycelium that's breaking everything down. Like without fungal life, we would be buried in garbage. So when these no-till pots, that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to feed the soil. You want to feed the microbial life, feed the small animals, feed the fungal life, feed everything. And then it just, in return, it'll give you like tenfold in return, right?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So that kind of like guess leads me to my next question, because I see you brew a lot of compost teas, and I brew a lot of compost teas as well. And compost teas are all about building the beneficial bacteria. Now, for those who don't know, a compost tea is pretty much an aerated tea, which is filled with like beneficial bacteria and microbes. But what sort of ingredients do you use, Natty, in your compost teas? Because everybody uses different ingredients.
Yeah, everybody's got their own mix. I mean, the base mix is, a cup or two of worm castings, some sort of a carb source, usually like an unsulfured molasses, and other like you could be pretty good right there with just that if you wanted to. But for myself, I usually use a little bit of alfalfa, a little bit of kelp meal. I really like. You'll find a lot of micro and macronutrients in both of those, but you're also going to find a lot of like probiotics and a lot of amazing things in there, a lot of enzymes that are really going to help out. Great for like microbial food. I usually add a little bokashi. Shout out to my good green home because I love their bokashi. A little bokashi in there, because that's filled with essential microbes and lots of micronutrients. Once again, there's a lot of great stuff going on there. Worm castings. And I usually add a little yucca or some soap nuts to my water. So worm castings, alfalfa, kelp, bit of molasses, bokashi, and with the water, I'll usually use like yucca or soap nuts. That kind of thickens the water up a little bit, and we get this saponification. So like those natural bubbles. Right, it's like natural soap, pretty well. Well, soap nuts. I mean, that's where they get their names. That's what we were using them for, was soap. You can get saponification from yucca, aloe, soap nuts, a few different things. And what that means is just we're creating like a foam. So that also helps feed that tea. So that'll like really brews a really rich microbial tea. We're aerating, we're bubbling, we're getting those microbes to kind of bloom. So then when we feed to the soil, we're kind of enriching the soil with more microbial life to help break everything down. But you gotta that yucca really helps because it'll kind of help with the water retention as well, right?
I love that you brought that up.
Through. It'll just kind of helps it slowly make its way through. It's a great source of microbe food, but it also helps like break down any remaining salts that might be left over as well, right? So
for those who don't know, just explain what yucca is, because I had to do a quick Google search just now to find out it's a sort of plant. I think like a sort of shrub. Is it? Am I correct?
I don't know if I've actually ever seen yucca without it being in like powdered or shredded form.
Okay.
But it's like there's yucca, soap nuts, aloe, and there's a few other things that hold saponins, right?
Yeah.
And these saponins in the water can enrich that water and really give us what we call saponification, which is like the bubbling, where you get like natural soap bubbles. Which is So yucca is like the most common one that people will get because like soap nuts are a little expensive. Aloe can be a little expensive if you're going to go for just like, just going for like the saponification part of it. But they all come with a lot of like benefits. There's a lot of microbes, there's a lot of enzymes, there's a lot of phytohormones, there's a lot of great stuff happening in there as well, right? But yeah, for the most part, you'll see people using Yucca to thicken up that water a little bit, get that foamy action, get a little more water retention in the soil. I actually add shredded Yucca to my soil mixture.
Okay.
All right. So it's actually already in there, and that'll help. As that breaks down, that'll also help with water retention and a few things, right?
All right. So how long would you usually bubble your teas for? I know some people, depending on their temperature in their, like where they live, they'll brew it for different lengths of time. So how long do you typically brew yours for?
It kind of depends on what you're going for. Like if we brew it a little shorter or a little bit longer, it's going to be a little more aerobic or anaerobic. So we're going to get a little bit more of different types of microbes. But like 24 to 36 hours is a pretty good place to shoot for. For me, obviously, it's a little colder. So, I shoot for 24 to 36 hours with an aquarium. Still have to use an aquarium pump in the water as well, or aquarium heater. Sorry, aquarium heater.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Well, I guess I never really thought about it, but you're in the cold, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, right. Because they go dormant. They go dormant outside, right? If it's winter time, they go dormant in the soil. So we want to make sure that they're like warm and they're ready to bloom and feed off that carb source and just bloom, and then
make sure they're happy.
Feed them out to the soil. Yeah, keep the soil happy then.
Yeah. Now, I also saw on your IG that you brew up a bunch of like fermented fruit juices or FFJs all the time. Yeah. Tell me about those. Why are those so good for plants, and why do you always use them in the garden?
Well, I actually haven't used them now in a few months, but I was doing it for a nice while there to kind of try it out, see how the plants are going to react. I mostly only did the bloom ferment ones just to see how they would react, because where I have my own strain and I've grown it a few times now, I kind of know what I'm looking for. I know what she's going to produce towards the end. So I wanted to try out all these fermented teas, all these fermented inputs and stuff, all these FPJs and FFJs and FPEs and whatever, all these acronyms. Yeah, right. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're trying to just like pull as much of the nutrients and everything and the phytohormones and everything that's left in the leaves or in the fruit or whatever's in there, all those amino acids, because they're rich in amino acids. And then you're trying to ferment it all with a bit of sugar. So as we ferment, we're bringing in more probiotics. We're bringing in more of those, like, we'll find some labs, we'll find probiotics, we'll find a lot of like amazing enzymes and stuff that are really going to help the soil life. Right? Because once again, that's what it's about. It's almost like the same idea as like your aerated tea. You're feeding soil, you're feeding the microbial life, you're culturing different types of microbial life to feed to the soil. And that adds to that diversity, which then allows us to have a much healthier ecosystem down in the soil, right?
Yeah.
And of course, these ones where they're fermented, they bring a lot of enzymes and stuff with them as well from the plants. And that helps with like terpene boosting, and which I've noticed the terpenes were fantastic on those few grows that I tried with it. And the plant health was great. Plant health was wonderful. But that's something I've actually pulled away from right now, because like it's something that I was just kind of shooting from the hip anyway. So I'm not super versed in it. It's like, I'm gonna pull back from this. We're gonna like dial this in, and then I'll get back.
Experimentation.
I'll get back into the ferments after. But yeah, it's the same idea as you're trying to utilize everything you possibly can for your garden. So like an example is like the FPEs. So fermented plant extract or something like that. You can say I go in and I heavily defoliate. I could take all those leaves, I could rip them and tear them. You rip them and tear them into little bits and throw them in a bucket. The ripping and the tearing releases a stress hormone in the plant, which tells it, hey, we need to repair this leaf, even though it's been disconnected from the plant. Like you're tearing it up, and that says, okay, stress hormone. We need to put this back together. We need certain types of like those growth hormones, like PGRs pretty well, right? As we do that, and then we add like brown sugar. Say we put it all in a bucket, we add brown sugar, which has this osmotic pressure. So it pulls all those nutrients and everything out of the leaf. We've created this like nice sugary little input with, all the nutrients that were in those leaves, all those growth signals, and all those things that were happening during flowers. So now you've got this nice little additive that you can add to your water. And it's like, depending on if you're going to do veg or flower or whenever you pull that defoliation, you could say I pull them on veg time. I would use that specific FPE to feed to my vegging plants because it has the specific hormones that plant was going through. So it's the same thing with flower, right? If you defoliate during flower, you can take all that plant, do that whole process, and what you're doing is you're getting an extract that kind of helps you out through flower time. Is like the idea about a lot of it, right? So I've noticed health in my plants. They seem to like it. I've done a lot of FPE, and I find the veg and the seedlings absolutely love it. Like love it. They explode with growth. And that like works for everything. Like I've like popped seeds in it, like little avocado seeds and things like that. Like put that in there, and everything pops faster. It grows a little more vigorous. So it's working.
They sometimes say don't fix something that's not broken, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I mean, if it's experimental, then I can see why. But it makes a lot of sense because I never ever thought of like cutting up the leaves and doing like what you did with them. And how do you then feed the FFJ, fermented fruit juice, FFJ? How do you feed it to the plants?
So it's just like your aerated tea. This is like the same idea. So and you can even like add it to your aerated tea. So I'll usually have my bag, my cheesecloth or my micron bag or whatever filled with your, like we were saying, compost tea, everything, all your worm castings, your bokashi, all that stuff in there. But to the water, I'll probably add a few teaspoons of FPE and a cup or two of the FPJ, which is your fermented plant juice or whatever, right? Which is the one that's like bananas and strawberries, pineapples, and all the extra stuff. But that's all you're doing. You're just adding a little bit to the water reservoir. Let it do its thing for a little bit and feed it in.
Relatively straightforward. On that note, I've seen that you grow like a bunch of other different vegetables and stuff in your grow tents, like peppers, a lot of peppers. I assume you love peppers and pepper sauce. Basil, tomatoes. I've seen you grow a lot of stuff. So do you do that solely as like companion planting for your herbs, or is there another reason behind it?
So, well, that kind of takes me back to like the forest thing, like maximizing every square inch. So like, a lot of us, we do monocrop. It's just straight up, just monocrop, one big sea of the exact same thing. But you're losing out on all this soil that you have here. There's so much potential in there.
It's true.
So there's there's a lot to that. Like, I just planted a bunch of stuff yesterday. So I planted like cucumbers, watermelons, peanuts.
I love it.
Peanuts, dill, rosemary. There's all kinds of stuff. And cover crop, obviously.
Yeah.
But the reasoning behind that is like there's a few things. Like you're like say in those 7 gallons, I had dark opal basil, which can be a pest deterrent, dill, which can also be a pest deterrent, chamomile, which can kind of help with some terpene boosting. There's a few other things that were all in there. A lot of it was experimental, but with like the dill and the basil, I could go in and get fresh dill and fresh basil for my kitchen. I can also tear some of that up and drop down as a mulch cover, and that actually helps kind of repel bugs as well.
Excellent point. I never thought of that.
There's also new studies coming out that show that if say like in my 45-gallon pots, right? There's going to be everything. There's cover crop. There's clover, peanuts, cucumbers. There's everything that you can think about is down there, while also doing like regular photo periods, and all the other thing is going to be down there. When we talk about that soil food web, it's down in there. So right, everything is communicating. It's all working off together. That basil and that other plant and the tomato, they're all communicating with each other. So if there's a stress hormone released in one, it tells the others through mRNA like communication. They can actually exchange mRNA and help strengthen each other. So they'll actually help boost each other's terpenes, and they'll help boost the soil life. They work as like a community. So when they start to detect pests, it might do the same thing, right? It's like, hey, like I'm getting chewed up by pests over here, and it communicates that to the soil, which then makes this plant produce more oils, which makes this plant communicate its terpenes to this one and this one to that one. So it can help with overall life, with the overall end product. The terpenes kind of enhances a lot of things. So, and I've been noticing like that little 2x2, I had pests in the tent next to it. But the 2x2 with the basil and the dill and all the other things, untouched.
Perfect.
Untouched the entire time. And like I didn't have to do anything with it. They're just happy, they're communicating, and they're kind of looking out for their own, right?
Yeah. The pests were probably like, let's stay away from those guys over there.
Yeah. And then like on top of that, like when you have chamomile growing and you have like borage or you have these other things, they're not just good for cover crop. I could go in and pick all the heads off the chamomile, let those dry out, and I have chamomile tea. Like,
true,
right? Like everything that you see that I've planted is intentional. I'm either going to eat it, I'm going to use it as a medicinal, right? With like teas, herbs, spices, all those different things. Or it'll be something that I can chop and drop. So a cover crop, we'll chop it, we'll drop it, and that'll feed the microbial life. Or it'll be something that I can chop up and ferment, and it's full of a specific hormone or a specific rooting compound or something like that, right? So everything in there is intentional. It either feeds the soil, works with the plant, or it feeds us.
Yeah.
So we're maximizing everything without sacrificing quality or space, right? Like I can vine tomatoes up the side of that tent if I want and still grow other things in there.
Well, I wouldn't doubt that you would do that. I wouldn't doubt that for 1 second.
Oh, I'm going to. That's the plan. That is the plan. I'm putting trellis nets down the sides and across the back, and we're going to vine flowers. We're going to vine tomatoes. We're going to vine the peanuts. We're vining everything. If I can move it up and out of the pots and vine it around, I'll pick a fresh tomato every single day. I'll go get fresh peppers. I'll go have herbs. And all at the same time, I'm feeding myself, my household, my soil, and my plants. You're buffing the air as well, right? You get clean air. That actually leads me to a point of like CO2. A lot of people always want to add CO2. When you're doing big batches of soil like this, you don't have to add CO2. There's a lot being produced through all those processes coming from the soil, right? All that breakdown, all that decay that's happening underneath, all those mycelium. You look at exhale bags, the exhale CO2 bags.
CO2 bags, yeah.
Yeah, I use those. They're fantastic, but it's a brick. It's a brick of like a certain medium that they inoculate with fungal life, and as it breaks down that medium, it releases CO2. So it's the same thing as your pots, right? And that's an awesome example for somebody who like might not get that forest idea, because like you can watch that brick become inoculated. It slowly makes its way down. It becomes completely white. And as that fungal life kind of envelops it, it releases CO2. But only long after that will any mushrooms start to appear on the top of that brick. I've got an old one here that has like little mushrooms going off the top, but it had to completely envelop and really establish itself in that brick. Right. So same thing in your pots, right? Like you're releasing that CO2 is coming from there anyway. Right. So we don't really have to like push it and give it anything else unless we're going like on a much bigger scale. Right. Like it works great in a 5x5, a 4x4, any of those kind of sizes. If you got like good living soil, you don't really need to supplement extra CO2. You're crushing it already.
Yeah, that's a great example. I love it. Now that kind of brings me on to like cover crops. We spoke about that a few times, like in the last 5 minutes. For those who don't know, can you just explain what cover crops are and what sort of cover crops do you use or recommend? Because there's a bunch of different sort of cover crops that you could use. Tons.
Oh man, is there ever?
Tons.
So like the base cover crops would be let's say like lentil, clover, different types of clover as well, because there's a lot of different types of clover. It's usually like a red clover, lentils, fenugreek, alfalfa is another good one.
Yeah.
There's a few things like that. Barley, I really like barley. But what the idea behind cover crop is same idea, that square from the forest floor. It's heavily covered. So you like my pot is now heavily covered, and all this soil, all this life. It doesn't grow tall, right? So it's not going to get out of hand. It's not going to be huge. It grows, fairly short. But the idea is the roots is gonna give us more soil structure. That topsoil is gonna be a little stronger. The roots are now helping communicate with all the rest of the roots. We're gonna keep more water retention for that surface soil, because we've got a layer here. It's kind of protecting that top layer of soil so it doesn't dry out, it doesn't become hydrophobic, which can happen, especially in different types of soil. Dries out a little too much, try to pour water on it, just sits on the top. It's become hydrophobic. So we add that cover crop that adds in that soil rigidity, the soil structure, keeps the water retention, but it also does a lot of things that we call nitrogen fixing. So it's pulling nitrogen, that's kind of helping store it and level out those levels of nitrogen and carbon and everything that's going down in the soil. That then kind of gives us a more stable environment and helps feed those plants a lot easier, right? Like if I just planted a couple of big plants in there and just didn't do the cover crop, they'd be happy, but they wouldn't have the same like exchange of nitrogen and hydrogen and all the same. They wouldn't have the same things happening in there. It wouldn't be, that surface level would be dry. It'd be hard to maintain. So on top of that, once that cover crop grows so far, we do what we call chop and drop. So you pretty well mow the lawn, right? You chop it right off. Say it's like this tall, I'll leave it this tall. Now you've got almost like straw across the top. You've got all this stuff, but now you dressed it in all of these toppings, which as that starts to break down, that feeds the soil life. Those things are full of nutrients that you couldn't get into soil. You had to like build that plant first, chop it down, and as it releases that, it feeds the fungal life. So now we have more fungal life. It feeds the soil. It makes more stuff bioavailable, right? So there's a lot of great advantages to that. And it's, me personally, even in a small pot, I've found that either a cover crop or a mulch layer, say like straw or something like that, over the top, to be able to hold in that little bit of like that surface soil, the water, on the surface of the soil, like be able to hold in that water retention, moisture retention, huge. I find it huge. The soil feels better, it acts better, and the plants just seem to act a lot better.
Well, you just sort of answered my question, because I was going to ask, like, if there's a certain size pot that you would use to grow cover crops in as opposed to another, like maybe 3 might not be so great as opposed to 10 or 15. But based on what you're saying, it seems that cover crops might always be a good idea. I guess depending on your setup.
Smaller pots, like if it was a 1, 3, and even up to, well, like 3, I do cover crop in 3, but like the gold standard, let's say, for living soil, like something that we're trying to culture that life and do our thing, like the gold standard's about like a 15 gallon. That's kind of like where you could really fill it up. You're not going to run into any problems. You could really culture a lot of life. The smaller the pot gets, I'll hit you with another analogy. Like the smaller the pot gets, the less we can fill it with diverse life. Say you've got, 20 acres out in the woods. There's bears, there's lions, there's tigers, there's foxes. There's a little bit of everything in there, but they have enough space that they can be around each other. 1 or 2 goes missing, whatever, it's no big deal. They all have their own place. They all have their own spot in it. But if we jam all those tigers and bears and lions and everything in one little room, 1 or 2 are going to come out on top.
So
it's the same with your pot, right? You can't really culture that much life in a small pot, right? So when it comes to the smaller ones, I'd go for more like a mulch layer. So straw or hay or something like that you could keep over the top. It's not going to affect the root zone, but it is going to keep that surface nice and moist I'm still allowing airflow, right? Because if we don't have airflow, then the surface level is also going to become rich for places for like the fungus gnats and stuff that come in. So smaller pots, mulch layer. If we start to go a little higher, hit it with the cover crop, and you can experiment. Like that's a lot of what I'm doing is I'm experimenting. I take like peppermint is a pest deterrent, so I try to sprinkle peppermint all over it. Rosemary, all those things. Like if they can grow enough that I can start chopping them. A lot of your IPM sprays, so integrated pest management, for anybody who doesn't know what that is. IPM sprays, a lot of those are made with like rosemary oil or cinnamon oil or peppermint oil. The one that I use, Method 1, the only spray that I use, Method 1, is peppermint oil, rosemary oil, a surfactant, and some form of an isoalcohol, so it dries off the plant a lot quicker. But like that's it. So if you can grow peppermint and rosemary and other things successfully in your pots and use that as your chop and drop and your mulch, then you're already at like a pest deterrent level of like, right? So it's, you know, there's a lot of like little intricacies to it, but you just experiment, check them out as you go.
I got you. That's a great tip. Actually, I noticed that myself because in a lot of the organic pest sprays, they're basically made of those ingredients, natural ingredients that you can grow yourself.
Like Lost Coast Plant Therapy. Everybody swears by it.
Yes.
Look at the ingredients. Peppermint oil. I don't even know if rosemary oil is in that one. I think it's just like peppermint oil, surfactants, and a few other things. So that's like yucca. When we were talking about yucca and saponification, those can be used as a surfactant, which just means that like if you spray your plant with just straight water, you'll notice it'll hit and then it'll bead and it'll fall off. It'll just come off, right? It's not going to sit there. But when you use like integrated pest management and sprays where you want to spray the plant and let it sit for a little bit, usually a surfactant, something like yucca or soap nuts, allows it to sit a little bit longer without choking out the plant, but it will sit a little bit longer on leaves and underneath the leaves and wherever. And that allows your sprays to be a little more effective, right? So even your pest sprays, they're usually, you know, something fairly simple. So if you could grow that stuff at home, you could make those at home, but you'd have to grow, obviously you would have to grow, you're extracting it. So you would have to grow a fair amount, but right, possibilities are there. So if you got the room, do yourself a few pots of just things that you will use, right?
Yeah. Good point. Now we can go down like a dark, never-ending rabbit hole on this, and well, my next question as well. So I just wanted to quickly touch on pollen before we wrap things up. So I see you've done some super funny reels with pollen flying everywhere in the tent that had me laughing for I love that. That was good.
I've been sitting on that audio for a while. That was a funny day for me. I did a lot of content on that day.
I'll have to throw that up for everyone to see it. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, like I said, check out Natty's Naughty Nursery on Instagram.
Go check out my reels. Natty's Naughty Nursery. Yeah.
Now, a lot of people are like interested in breeding, but I'm not going to get into breeding in this episode. We could probably save that for another episode. But
for sure.
In terms of like when you get a male that you want to collect pollen from, I've seen that you've done some breeding and I'm assuming some collection of pollen. So for those people who want to like collect pollen from their males and store them, how would you suggest that they do that?
Safely.
Safely. Keyword safely.
So first off, for anybody who's considering breeding or working with your own pollen is like air. Like don't mess around because that will go everywhere in an instant. It is micron sized and it will just go poof, everywhere if you don't have the proper standard operating protocols, the proper SOPs in place. So I get asked that a lot because if you go check out my rows upstairs with those four tents upstairs, I got flowering and I got veg, I got a bunch of stuff happening, I got mother plants. But in the 5x5, I have a large flowering male who's producing pollen, has it going everywhere. As long as you have proper like negative pressure and standard operating protocols, you're not going to get it everywhere. When it comes to collecting it, you have a few different options. Some people get keef boxes. I don't know if you've ever seen like a keef box?
Yeah.
Right? Little micron screen. You can like, cut the branches small enough and you just kind of tap them on there and that'll put the pollen through.
Interesting.
Some people take the whole plant. They take like a mirror is a great one. Big mirror or some sort of a flat surface like that it's not going to stick to. Like you couldn't do it on cardboard or something. It would stick, right? But if you've got a big surface that you take the whole plant, especially like a big mirror or something like that, and you just kind of pound, you can just kind of tap that whole plant down on top of that, you can then scrape all that pollen off. You still want to you still want to probably filter it through some micron screens because there's going to be pollen sacs and everything else is going to fall off. But like the biggest thing is just like be smart about it. Be smart about it because like it'll go everywhere and pollen is viable for a while. So like some tips that I could give people is have negative pressure. So like in the 5x5 tent, my tent is almost like sucked in a little bit because that one has the pollen. I don't want it to go anywhere. When I open that tent, nothing escapes.
Yeah.
Like everything gets sucked in through there. It never comes out of there. Secondly, water makes pollen inert. So if you're going to say I got that male in there now, I am actually going to have to make him leave that room. And he has to go down to another tent. So before I do that, I'm probably going to douse him heavy in water. I'm going to spray him right down with water, soak him. All the pollen that's on him right then is useless. And I'll move him then. I can relocate him, give that tent a good wash and a good spray down. And you're pretty well good to go. But you have to make sure you do a good clean. Because say that pollen gets in the fan. The next time you get a flowering plant in there, you turn that fan on. Some of it might be viable. I mean, obviously, it's not proper storage, but some of it's going to be viable. And like I said, it's like air. You're not going to turn it on and see pollen go everywhere. You're just going to be like 6 weeks into your grow and be like, where are these seeds coming from?
Why?
Why is this seeded, right? There's nothing is hermed. Why is this full of seeds? And that's because there was leftover pollen floating around. So it's all about those standard operating protocols. Just be smart. It's the same thing like outdoors garden and then come indoors. You don't just go right to your garden. So if you're going to go in, you're going to work with that male, you dedicate your time. You say, okay, this is the male tent. This is where they live. They don't come out of here. I can collect when I do need to pull them out and collect my pollen. Everything else is shut. I have a specific room or something that I'm going to take this male, collect that pollen, and then thoroughly wash everything, including myself, before I ever go see those females again.
Yeah.
Right. And other than that, you can just collect your pollen together in like containers or whatever, and you can short term kind of store it in a fridge. Usually I hear people add a bit of flour to it as well. That'll help keep it a little more stable and like a little bit of a longer shelf life. But for the most part, collect it and like use it.
Yeah.
Use it.
Don't stick on it for too long.
Or send it out to a friend who will use it because it needs to be shared. That's the point of all of this. Just share it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. As we can see, breeding is something that we can definitely get into like a dark rabbit hole with. And
I got all kinds of stuff seeded here, and I've got my own beans, and I've got previous lines. I'm pheno hunting stuff. Like we could talk. That's another show.
Yeah, definitely. I saw that you got the beans that you're running as well. But as we close things off, so just where can everyone find you? I know your IG we mentioned is Natty's Naughty Nursery, but tell us a bit about the podcast and where we can find you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you can find me on Natty's Naughty Nursery on Instagram. That's where you'll find most of the shows and stuff. Like most of all the like growing content is going to be on there. Cooked and Caffeinated. That's my podcast. You can find that on YouTube. Recorded episodes are on YouTube. The show is live on Twitch every Sunday. We just did a awesome podcast there last Sunday. Quite nice. I enjoyed that with Canabakem. Awesome guest. You can find me on Discord. You can find me on Twitch at Natty Doofy. YouTube, soon we'll be doing weekly vlogs of everything that's happening because we've got a lot happening. So you'll be able to keep up on weekly vlogs there soon. Other than that, follow me on Instagram, and you can find a link tree there. You can find all my links. You don't have to go through all this rambling.
Well, thank you so much, Natty, for joining me. You've been an awesome guest, special guest in this third episode. The man, the legend, Natty Newfie, Natty's Naughty Nursery.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Cheers, bro.